I've had the great pleasure of working with Todd Oldham over the past year and a half on this exhibition and of his just astounding fashion career. And I'm so happy to have the honor to introduce Critical Encounters, Kicking the Machine, a discussion between Todd and his dear friend Wendy Goodman. I hope everybody's had a chance to see the exhibition upstairs. Has everybody seen it? Yeah. And if you haven't, you will be running upstairs to the galleries after this. And I think that you will be running up there no matter what many times over to look at these pieces and really just revel in the beauty and the workmanship. I think, every time you'll find one or two or three or hundreds of gems up there, literally, to focus on. It's really been a pleasure for me. I've been working with these pieces for over a year and a half, and I still see things that surprise me and just make me happy in general. So like you, I've been looking forward to this moment for a long time. My comments here will be very brief so we can bring our attention to the main act. Wendy Goodman, design editor at New York Magazine since 2007, has a resume of journalism in the design world that stretches back to Todd's blazing entry onto the New York fashion landscape in the early 1990s. She connected with Todd at the very beginning of his fashion career when she covered his first runway show for Harper's Bazaar. As she put it, I was totally mesmerized and inspired by his unique and unorthodox way of doing just about everything. Prior to her current position at New York Magazine, Wendy also covered the world of style and fashion for House & Garden, traveling to Paris, Milan, and New York Fashion Week shows, as well as tracking fashion designers and artists at home. In her newer role, she's continued to feature Todd's design acumen, including and she still describes to this day, one of her proudest moments was covering his house and his own apartment design for House & Garden, and she's also more recently covered his apartment design in New York Magazine. Wendy, of course, is not alone in being captivated and charmed by Todd's maverick approach to making. The show's title, All of Everything, was inspired by writer Gertrude Stein's phrase, "and then there is using everything." From the beginning of his design career, Todd has drawn meaningful inspiration from everything around him, and this includes the sewing skills taught to him by his mother and his grandmother, memories of the bazaars in Tehran where he lived as a teenager, thrift store finds that he picked apart for pattern-making details, vintage catalog illustrations, and even narratives from Three Stooges episodes. Equally important, Oldham throughout his career has tested the limits of technology and craft, hacking traditional manufacturing processes and manipulating materials in completely unexpected ways. The resulting garments are truly feats of imagination and technique that have the power to teach us the value of soaking up everything around us, thinking laterally, and never confining oneself within traditional boundaries, always overreaching and taking risks, having confidence in materials, embracing the expertise of others, and there are some experts in the audience today who we'll introduce you to, knowing how to laugh, never feeling complacent, and always prioritizing a buzzing and active mind and spirit. I'll say no more for the moment at least, and I'm very happy to turn the stage over to Todd and Wendy.
Everyone. So exciting to be here. I just got off the Excella and ran to see Todd and the show, and I have to say, I hope you all have seen it, because it's truly, I have to tell you also, I was at those shows. I was so lucky because I was there and I was sitting in the audience and I was freaking out. And I thought, I'm seeing something that I will never see anywhere else. And I'm seeing a process that is so unique. And I was covering the shows in Milan, and I was going to Paris, and I was seeing couture. But what I realized and said to Todd when we were upstairs was, there are designers in America, like Jimmy Galanos and like, I don't know, but other ones. And they did, quote, couture pieces, but the couture that they did was always referencing Paris. And it was always very much in like, we can be as good as the European designers, because up until really Eleanor Lambert, who was an amazing American publicist, decided she would turn her attention to American design, because Diana Vreeland and all the designers before, all the editors before her were going to Paris and really touting Parisian design. But Eleanor Lambert made a real case for American design. That is to say, anyway, that what I'm trying to get at is that looking at Todd, the workmanship, looking at you really can't understand it till you look very closely. It is the most extraordinary couture work, and it's completely American. It is not imitating anything else. It is coming out of this brilliant imagination. And I think that that is something that we really have to be so grateful for, because you really kind of set a course in American design. And seeing it, I feel so sad because we're missing so much now. I think the fashion world clearly is in 2016. It's not, how many years ago was it?
It's not the same.
It's not the same. But when I was watching the shows and Todd was designing, no computers. All of this work that you're seeing, this was done by hand. That's number one, no computers. And when I was in the audience, no horrible social media. I was just sitting there looking at things, and I was astounded, and I wasn't distracted, and I was taking notes, or I was trying to maybe do a little drawing, but I was really looking. And I think that the great thing about all of you here at this incredible school is that you are also really looking, and you're absorbed in the process of observing and of understanding through the eye and through, the touch of fabric. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just think that I think that what Todd has accomplished, which I was really, I witnessed it, as I said, but to see it in one place, and also the installation that allows you to see 360 a piece of clothing, is extraordinary. So I want Todd to tell us a little bit about process, because the fashion world back when you started was a very different place. There were designers designing. There weren't corporations buying up talent and then destroying talent. It was really and I don't mean to depress you if that's going to be happening to you. And that doesn't happen to everybody, but it's a very different scene. And you worked always very independently. So I would love you to describe a little bit of your process, going back to maybe the very first show.
Well, first of all, thank you for those lovely words, Wendy, and I'm very pleased you're here. The process was always the most important to me. I'm completely process-oriented. I'm very detached from outcome, which I feel is a healthy way to go about, to maneuver through the arts. For some reason, we had this idea that if we weren't almost killing ourselves to do everything, then we were doing it wrong. And it wasn't like we caused extra complications. It was just the layer of devotion to getting an idea to bloom. And it was insane. And actually, that dedication was the very same thing that made me wrap it up 10 years later, because I take what I do very seriously. And certainly in this medium, the pleasure working with all these artisans, and it's like laboratory work. Yeah. To get these things out, and that was a huge pleasure. So if you don't have I think you have to be very honest. If you have nothing more to say, it's time to move, which is what I did. But the making during was as exquisite an experience as I could have ever hoped for. The idea was, as you mentioned, no computers were involved. It was a completely analog experience. Everything was done through our hands. My mom and my father and my sister are here, who all worked with me. My mom and I stood next to each other making all the patterns for all those years. So physically, the cut patterns, we would lay out every single embroidery ourselves, every print we produced. It just never occurred to me to go buy things. It just always was, well, we had the opportunity to make it, so why wouldn't we do that? Later in sort of the career, I became sort of amused to work with bigger factories that could do things like stretch faux leathers for us and those kinds of things that we couldn't get done on our own. But for the most part, it was always just, first it was that nobody would work with us, and we just did it anyway. And then once they started being ready to work with us, we kept the same spirit along the way. But every piece was sort of different. To me, they're like books or songs where there's a beginning, middle, and an end. Not only to the process, but somehow in the experience, either for the wearer or for the viewer. There's lots of tricks inside these clothes, which unfortunately we can't show being on the inside. But we always, in my head, designed for the wearer, because that's the most important person. Clothes are personality amplifiers of sorts. But I always thought it was more interesting that you feel spectacular in it. I wanted, the person to shine first, which I understand may feel like a contrast when you see that virtual clown school of clothes upstairs, but
it's not clowny at all. It's the least. It is real couture. Seriously.
Well, thank you.
It really is.
I'm very pleased with it, and it's interesting to see it again after all these years, because some of that stuff is 25 years old at this point, and I still feel the same joy and the same commitment to my ideas. That I didn't look at any of that stuff and I wish I'd have done that a little differently. There are definitely some seams that could be tightened a bit, but as far as the original ideas, those still feel very good to me.
You also had so many different collaborations with other, like Laura Manet. How did all your collaborations really come about?
I'm a fan. That's one of my favorite things about what I get to do, and I hope I never lose this. I'm a huge fan of creativity and genius. So whenever I was near somebody that amazed me, I was so happy that almost always they were willing to have an adventure with me. So whether it was somebody like Lalit Gera, who must be in the audience. This is Lalit Gera and his beautiful DNA. Came from a sari manufacturer that's been in business for hundreds of years in India, and Lalit produced virtually every piece of beaded clothing I ever made. And if I didn't have that, exactly. If I hadn't had the opportunity to work with an artist like Lalit and the beautiful team of artists that he had in Mumbai, it was, I can't imagine. It was just the most beautiful thing to have my ideas and my paintings and my collages translated through Lalit's filter. And one of the, if one has a factory, there's always leftovers of sorts, and they tend to get tucked in nooks and crannies around the building. But you can imagine the leftovers in a 400-year-old factory. So there was some good leftovers, let me tell you. So when you see many of those, you're looking at, in many occasions, you're looking at several hundred-year-old materials on those pieces, the cut lock rosins, it's the real gold bullions. It was an incredible thing. In hindsight, I didn't realize what I was really working with. But it was also very fast. It was like trying to hang on to a jet wing, this business. And I worked night and day for 10 years, solid, and as did the whole family and everyone that was around us. But it took that sort of dedication. And once you are a part of a community that thinks art first and passion, and they don't limit the degree to execute, that is just heaven, which is makes me so pleased to be a part of show at this beautiful learning institution, because we have a kinship of idea.
Absolutely. How do you? Oh no, I'm not going to ask that yet. Because
Uh-oh.
I was going to ask about the business side, which, you were working, as you said, we were talking about, you were working in a kind of bubble. You weren't really paying attention to the outside and to what the pressures were from the stores and the buyers. And how did you deal with that?
Well, I didn't. Tony did, which was the hugest blessing. Everyone made an effort to keep me out of the showroom, because I was quick to say no. And, it's like, I already did it. You don't need to ask for it shorter.
Right.
or any of the other things, which was not, I should have been more flexible, I guess. But Tony handled all of the business stuff, and I just enjoyed the factory. I loved the making. The second we were done with the show, my hands were washed and I was on to the next thing. I rarely attach to outcome. It's a very boring way to go about things.
And can we just call out Tony for 1 second here?
There he is. Yeah.
Tony is so major, it's beyond. So
It's true. None of this would be without my very dear family, which is Tony.
yeah,
and
the whole
Mom, Dad,
the tribe.
and Rob. Yeah,
Because-
we've worked together for
Yeah.
30 years now, all of us, and we still are happy to be in the same room with one another, and that's
It's
very
a
nice.
very special thing.
Yeah.
Now, you did make one, and it's behind us now, one new piece, which is this
yes.
extraordinary dress. Tell us how, so you thought, I need to make one new piece? How did this come about?
Well, when Kate and RISD asked me to do this, which was just such a bizarre thrill. Sometimes you just asked to do things that were never in your vision in any capacity, and this indeed was one for me. But it was at the very same time that I was is it called teaching?
Yes.
Is it right? Anyway, I was here. No, there's so many college words I don't know, like the fellowships and that kind of stuff. I can't figure out this order. Somebody's going to have to make me a map of what these things mean. But anyway, I got to work with this a teacher, Miriam Field, who I love, and we had just the best time making. It was a surface design and silk screening. I can't even remember the name of the class, but we did all these great things within it. And among them was 35 just brilliant artists that were pretending to be students. And I had this opportunity to work with them, so I thought, one of the things I like to try to impart when I'm working with students is the importance of honoring your efforts and honoring your works, and that can be done through many ways. So one of them is to protect it and save your efforts and store them properly. And it's not about being precious, but it's honor your work. If you're going to be passionate about it, you should be passionate about protecting it. So with that in mind, I thought it would be a nice opportunity for all 35 of those students to see their name on the plaque at a museum that knows these things. This is a permanent thing, as much as anything's permanent in our world. This is indeed a permanent thing. It goes into the archive here. It's protected for as long as we're breathing, I guess. And I wanted the students to be a part of that. And then also, it was imagine having 35 people willing to do what you wanted. Wow, that was great. So I didn't want to guide the artist in any way, but I did make one suggestion. We did 3 panels. One of them was 28 feet long, which creates the skirt part of this. And there was another panel that was 5 yards long and another that was 3 yards long. And we tore the 3-yard piece up with great heartache to create the strips that were then knitted by a RISD graduate, Nora McLeod, who's right over there and works in our office. Yeah, Nora did a great job. I'll take a RISD break to welcome all of the people I get to work with every day who are also part of RISD's history. My office is design part of the office is entirely staffed by RISD grads, and there's a reason for that. Because this place really gives you a different kind of focus in the world. Yeah. It makes the brightest, most beautiful people, so it's a good thing to support.
So, but also you can look at your own design.
Oh, there it is. Oh, I've seen it, believe me.
Well, under that skirt, there are just masses and masses of beautiful tools. 1,500
running feet of hand-sheared tulle. Hand-sheared, and I can attest because Tony and I made that entire skirt. Yeah, it was 11 hours of hand stitching the under part of the skirt.
Tony.
The top part of the skirt took us a year. Between this, the fabric was created for us last February. It came to New York, and it's been moved on and off the table so many times by dozens of people coming by to embroider. Which was just a beautiful thing because this dress, it was very strange to create a dress that would never be worn. This will never be worn.
Oh, don't be so sure.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, somebody in the museum's going to sneak in and have a party one night, I think. You can't get through the doors here, though. The doors are too small.
Well, women in the 18th century did it with their panniers.
That's true. You just have to squish through. Yeah. They probably didn't have elevators to deal with. So the embroidery was really fun to do because we also made the paillettes. I do, of my
Who
modern.
makes paillettes? Come
Well,
on, really?
we get to make paillettes. It's really unbelievable to me. But because of another adventure we have called Handmade Modern and Kid Made Modern, which is to try to bring artist quality supplies and experiences to young artists. So I had the opportunity to actually, make paillettes. So with the idea that every morsel of this is customed, for us, it was just a real pleasure to get to see it come to life. So we spent, it was months and months and months of embroidery, 28 feet of embroidery that goes around the entire skirt. And because to my eye, and I think indeed this is a beautiful work of art. I'm not talking about my dress, I'm talking about the fabric. Is an exquisite work of art, and I couldn't even begin to be a part of defacing it. So I made an outline in my head that this whole thing had to be assembled without cutting. So this dress is done entirely through miter darts that gives you the shape. So in theory, the thing can be completely disassembled and pulled apart, and it will return back to its artwork. So I mentioned there was 3 panels. The 5-yard panel was the original one that was made for the strips. I tore about 8 inches to it and felt this heart pain. It was palpable that this is wrong, this is wrong. And I just stopped and looked at it, and I brought it, everybody else came over and looked too, we all agreed it was just this exquisitely composed, beautiful work that we couldn't do it. So we stopped, rolled it back up, went through the 3-yard piece. It was slightly less painful to attack. But then we've donated that 5-yard panel back to the museum, so the original artwork will be living here with the students did. So between the students, myself, and the teachers and the TAs, I think there was over 40 people that made the fabric. It's just a little insane.
Tell us a little bit also about the design of the installation, because this is such a wonderful experience to be able to walk through the garden of the clothing, and also to see it at 360, every single piece you can see completely in the round.
Well, that's one of the things I find would be a hiccup when you experience fashion in a museum. I'm not sure, I'm very honored that I'm in a museum, believe me, and I think it has its place, especially the artistry from the workers that made this stuff. But I've always felt a little dubious about fashion in museums. One of the main disconnects is that fashion is a 360 experience. As designers, we don't just design the front. So many times shows are oriented against the walls, which reduces our viewing cone by half at least. That's no good. So we wanted to avoid that. And when I think about what is lovely to pass through, there was a couple of things that came in mind. One is I love formal gardens, and I'm kind of a crazed gardener myself. And the idea of these like traditional French knot gardens feel really good to me, because what they do is they reveal a hint of what's coming, but they don't reveal everything. And that's one of the most beautiful rides. I also always keep in the back of my head a quote from the architect Morris Lapidus, who I had the great pleasure of working with for a piece on MTV. And Morris Lapidus was this wild man of architecture that did the Fontainebleau in Miami, known for much Googie architecture, and really wild guy that the critics just hated. And he just had a blast, and it's like this barreled through. But he told me, I was asking him why the Eden Rock was shaped as it was, which is a slight semicircle. And he said he bent the hallways because the place was so big he didn't want people to ever see where they were going. Otherwise, the ride would not be as lovely. I thought, wow, you know what? The ride has to be lovely. So I hear Morris in my head all the time. But in this case, it was indeed that. It was based on always trying to reveal a little bit about what was coming next. And it was very important to be able to see around the enclosed in their entirety. So we pulled everything off of the walls, completely sheared the light to the edge of the platform. So in a way, it kind of disappears. And the endlessness, you'll be standing with a full figure, and then one is this big way in the back, and it creates this kind of, it's a graceful pull. But this is a lot of ideas, a lot of disparate ideas combined into one presentation, which can be quite toxic and very hard to assimilate. I encounter this a lot with the books I do, because you have to sort out. I get to work with a lot of other artists' work to prepare these books, and you must sort it out in a graceful way. Otherwise, by page 25, everyone's gone cross-eyed, and you can't hang on any longer. So the same thing is with these clothes. So I did little tiny tricks which create bridges in the eye with color. You'll notice that when one platform stops in the other one, there's an adjacency of colors or shared color family. And that does something in the eye that makes it very friendly to continue. I tried, despite the few mannequins going like that, I tried to do nothing that would cause you to stop. And then the third point of inspiration was Richard Avedon's photography, group photography from the 60s and early 70s. If you think about the photographs of like Warhol's factory. Yes. And there was such an immediacy to those works. I think technically I can understand them because there was always someone in the foreground with the top of the head cropped off, which we read in a very different way. There's an immediacy to that. Start looking at the way things are cropped and you'll understand how we can manipulate as image makers. So there would be someone very close cropped off and someone far behind, and there was this gorgeous sense of depth, and you knew something else was off in the other directions you wanted to know. So that was kind of what we did purposeful, peculiar gapping in between the forms to create these additional sight lines that frame maybe the back of something that's very far away.
Did you make a maquette before you actually did the installation and move figures around?
I didn't. I knew, when we pulled the clothes, Kate and her team came to New York and we worked for a couple of days. We got every single thing out of the archive, and vintage clothing can't be hung. So everything had to be placed on, the entire office, we have a huge office, like 4,500 square feet, papered, and then everything was kind of globbed in rows, and it filled up the entire floor of our office. There's these little skinny pathways between that we would have to go pull it from to get it back.
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy.
Well, also, when you look at the variety of ideas alone, when you started designing a collection, did you start with fabric? Did you start with an idea of a theme? How did the collections emerge from your brain?
Well, I can float to the ethers very easily without some sort of guidelines, because the worst thing you could tell me is you can do what you want, because that...
Right.
Like
I mean, look back here, and for instance,
Oh,
you have
yeah.
described...
that pipe cleaner dress.
Yeah, I mean, talk about some of the things that we're seeing in relationship to how it was born.
Well, okay, this dress here that looks kind of like a fancy scarecrow was made, inspired by one of my design assistants, Angel Dormer, by her senior thesis, which was on color theory and dyeing. So she showed me this book that I just freaked out. It was all these little swatches of 4x6, 5x7 little pieces of all these color tones. And because they weren't properly finished or dipped, to seal, to lock the color, then they were pinned onto fabric. The light had sort of kissed them and moved them around a bit. And there was, they were raw on the edges. I thought this was the most beautiful thing. So she allowed me to pull it all apart and reassemble it, where we photographed it to create a photo print. So one thing I like to do, and that I continued with this moving along, was to take a theme and explore it, exhaust it, find as many ways as possible as I could find a way to bring it to life. So in the case of this, there was the printed photographic print version, and then there was that version that was all hand-torn sheets of silk chiffon, and the bodice was embroidered in the same manner that the interior of a men's jacket from the 40s would be. Like if you look at the lapels, there's a very intricate structure of buckrams and hand stitching that creates a hinge so that pieces move. And it's a very intricate thing. So basically what we did is just pull the outer part of the dress off and showed what would have been the under part of the...
Oh, that's so interesting. So every collection was exploring sort of a ribbon and just pulling it as far as you could take it.
Exactly.
And doing... I mean, for instance, one of my favorites is the little pink sweater.
Oh, yeah, that was a sweet piece.
I love that. But where did she come from?
Well, this came from two sides of the fence. One is an extreme love of flowers. I really, they just thrill me at every turn. We were talking today at lunch, the collection of glass flowers at Harvard. Have you guys seen this?
No.
Oh my God. Whoever hasn't seen it, you're fine to leave now and go to the Amtrak, because it is indeed worth it. It's one of the most astonishing feats of humanity you'll ever witness. But I share that same passion for flowers, with none of the skill to make those. But that piece was, the pants of that piece were really unusual. It looks just like a stripe, but what it really is silk dupioni that was embroidered with frosted beads and clear glass beads with cotton thread, so that when we flipped it over, we back painted it with different degrees of watered down inks that would then seep into the thread and fill the bead with color. So it's a very washy effect that you can't achieve with actual beading, and I thought it was a really good idea. Others did not agree, but it seemed like I don't know, it seemed pretty good to me. We did a lot of versions of the patterning. The most successful one was one that looked like an iceberg. But I think it was most successful because Cindy Crawford wore it in the show. So, you know, you could tape a piece of newspaper on her and it would become a hit. Yeah. She was extraordinary.
But the other thing is with there's a lot going on in each piece, or the combining of the pieces, but what you've always kept is a very clean silhouette. And you've always kept very identifiable, like a cardigan, or a turtleneck, or a dirndl skirt, or so that the combination of the wildness of the fabrics and the combinations has a calm, it lives in a calm place, and it lives in a very elegant, beautiful place. And the astounding thing is, when you look at some of the fashion today, it's so complicated, and it looks so uncomfortable, and you don't really know why it exists, except to torture people a little bit. But your pieces are so beautiful, and I find myself, and this is what would happen when I covered fashion and made up fashion stories in pages, was the women. Who are the women that these clothes are talking about? Because I immediately start to think of the personality who would wear these clothes. I mean, not that I'm not looking at the clothes, but I'm just imagining, oh, I would have the best life. Meet the most wonderful people if I could wear these clothes. And that has my name on it, the skirt back there with the sweater and the turtleneck.
I loved doing that. We would occasionally, we were endlessly sorting through bins. Thrift stores and flea markets were huge sources of not only inspiration, but literal product. I bought weird lengths of this barcloth fabric from the 40s. That's upholstery fabric from the 26th Street flea market. And there would be fixed lengths, like sometime there was only 12 yards or... Oh yeah, she's over there. So we knew exactly how many we could make. We might only be able to make 3 or of it. But through embroidery, would then change the patterns using parts of what was there and what was not. So that pattern on that skirt looks like they're dancers now, but they were ice skaters, and I took their clothes to the floor, covered the print with to create the skirts to make it a little more romantic. It was very pink, and I added that green kind of lawn to it.
And you've got to talk about the process you explained to me about the flowers on this coat.
I'm a bit amazed at this. That technique worked. This is crazy. It was a white polyester satin. Sublimation printing is a very peculiar process that came around in the late 60s and ended up on everybody's Farrah Fawcett t-shirt. I'm sure you had at some point. But it's a process where basically a pattern is printed on paper, heat-resistant paper, that's then heated to a specific temperature with a press, and it turns momentarily to a gas that is entangled into the fiber. So you can get photographic reproductions. You'll see a lot of the things up there are photographically reproduced. But in that case, we sent the panel to India to be embroidered, the Chinese flowers, came back, photographed it, sent it to the sublimation paper developers that then turned it into that. So then we took the panels, cut the panels of the coat, die-cut polyester organza flowers. This sublimation print only works on synthetics. Stitched them on top of the white, so it's white on white flowers on white fabric. Then we put them through the presses and pressed, but the organza was so sheer that the gas could seep through it and entangle behind it. So what you've got is matching printing. The flowers match what's underneath it, but in a slightly ghosted way. So that's why that top feels feels organized or something. But if we had just cut flowers and put on it, would have been such visual chaos. But because they feel appropriate to where they are.
Yes.
I was amazed. I remember when we pulled that out of the heat press. I couldn't believe that it worked.
You know, listening to you, it's just a wonder you got one thing made.
I agree.
You've been designing. I really had, in all the years that I've known you and looked at the clothes and seen the shows, I had no clue what the process was for each and every piece.
I was so lucky that everyone agreed that this was a reasonable behavior. You know, in hindsight, I see the cracks in that theory, but you know, it could never have worked if we all weren't on the same page.
Tony, you must have a lot to say about this subject. I will say also that I think that, in my experience, the really amazing designers like yourself, part of the beauty of the whole endeavor is this team of people. And even going back in history, Saint Laurent and Ralph Lauren has a huge coterie of people who've stayed in the company forever.
Yeah.
So I think that it's incredibly interesting because other companies and other businesses, people come and go, but it's different in fashion because people really bond together and believe in a vision.
Well, yeah,
And
you
for
must,
the most part, I think.
you have to have that family.
Yeah.
Your cabine is very important. It has to be complete, and it's spun sugar. You have to treat it with such reverence, and any negativity can just shatter the whole thing. So
Yes,
you really,
that's right.
you must have that kind of support
Yeah.
when you're. But I think can't that be said of any really beautiful, pure effort? It's the support
Yes,
around you.
absolutely. It can. The other thing I think you should let everyone know here, because they'll be designing their own collections, many people, is that you never had sample sales. So,
This is true.
and therefore, all these clothes are still in Todd's life, because sample sales were a huge part of our business and
Yeah.
still are, I think,
Well,
right?
They are indeed, but we spent months on things. The artisans would spend months on things. Carol Hunter, who assembled all these things, is also here, and we all just did. I just suddenly didn't want it on a rack with two people pulling at the hem, and it's $100. It seemed like a really undignified exit. So I just didn't want any part of it. So we just packed it up. In the archive it went, and then when we wrapped it up in, I guess, right at the end of the 90s, it was like, oh my God, we have so much stuff. This is really a shocking amount of things.
Goodness. The other thing that occurs to me looking at everything is that I don't believe, and maybe I'm really wrong, but that you thought about, I'm designing a fashion collection. I feel, looking at everything and listening to you, that you were designing wearable pieces of art. I mean, I know that sounds a little pretentious, but seriously, it's true that your mind wasn't thinking, I have a fashion collection. It's fall. Let's think fall. The colors are this, and the silhouette this fall is this, and because editors used to ask those kinds of questions, like, where do you see the trends going? Which Tony, he wouldn't answer that, right? Ever, ever.
Well, I couldn't. I mean, we were never fashionable. I think that's why the things look as they do today. I clearly know those things, but I can't exactly tell what time they were made within. There's a few extravagant collars that might suggest another time, but for the most part, when an idea was as complex or oblique or peculiar as the ones I came up with, the way to get the link between the wearer or the viewer was to make sure it was on. There had to be something within our public domain resonance. So that's why the shapes are somewhat simple. I think if you looked up there, you could assess that I was not that inventive with shape. But there was a very purposeful reason for that. There's many things that aren't. I mean, this is like this much of what I did is in that show, and there are many things I did just out of cloth. But when the ideas were really extravagant, or the pattern or the color was a bit over the top, you had to find it was a balance. It's just, I'm a Libra, where things have to be balanced.
Right.
And that to me, that was what made it where it didn't tip over into something that was ridiculous.
Right.
And I do love ridiculous. It's great. But I never lost sight that these were clothes.
But do you think that in our world today, a fashion designer could go and work the way that, could this be done now?
It could be done now, and I think with the computer advantage done in the right way, it would be, oh my God, what a relief. Things that would take us months to do could be done in an afternoon. Digital printing now, I can't even imagine what we would have pulled. Oh, I know it would have been, somebody would have been sweating at the factory, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because if you could, somebody said, we can do one, you don't have to order 20 meters from Italy and it'll take, 90 days. Here's this thing and you can have it in your office in 4 days and we have no repeats. Oh my God, can you imagine what could have been done? But I'm really surprised with the technology that's out there that there is not more stuff that interfaces with analog and digital experiences in more fruitful ways.
Having the opportunity now with technology, are you ever tempted to sort of stick your toe back in and say,
No.
well, no?
No, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I meant it when I stopped, and I haven't had any wavering at all. I do love the making things, and I really did enjoy working on this, and I loved hand setting the zippers. And it's kind of, I recognize that it's slightly, I don't know what exactly the word is, maybe we'll just call it stupid, to not use such ridiculous gifts I was born with. Like I didn't go to fashion school or pattern school, but I just had this thing that it just, I don't know, past life, whatever you want to call it, but I had skills that are unexplained.
Right.
And so when you have those, and it's a little strange to stop using them, but they're always there. Like the second the scissors come back out, I can
But
still
also,
do it.
you still are unfurling that beautiful ribbon, because what you're doing with Kids Made Modern, which I don't know if you all know about, is so creative, and it's again analog, going back to having kids make things, use things, very much in the way that you sort of, I feel, started to work with these clothes.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's very dear to me. Kid Made Modern is sort of a world of creativity and expression of artist quality materials for children. And I was raised beautifully, but with creativity. And we had a craft table in the middle of our living room that we spent endless hours at. And it was always making first. Like we loved to make things. And digital experiences have erased, the time that one might spend doing that. And in so many cases have somehow replaced that effort. And I know that that's sad. And I know that sounds also like old person talk, but still, it's really important to have those physical expressions. I mean, our DNA is not just this. It's, we can dance to our efforts. And I want people to hang on to that, because I couldn't breathe if it was just all stuck in this little thing. I mean, how can we reduce the beautiful effort and the vapors of creativity to binary codes? There's a disconnect. Not that there's great things you can't do with it, but you're missing something.
But I think it's important for young people coming in to see the show to realize that these things were not done on computer, because that's where their mind is going to go. They're going to think that. And I think that, it's so important to keep, this show should travel. It should come to New York. It should go across the country, because there's nothing quite like this show and your work to really explain the process of design in this way. It's so spectacular.
Well, thank you.
So I think that one of the things it also teaches is that you need to have, I always say, talking to people in my profession, that yes, the computer is great, but the one-to-one and the eye contact and talking to people, you learn so much, and that's where the riches are. And I think that, again, this is what you're doing. Also, because you're so generous. Your work with other artists and other makers is all connected to that.
Well, it's such a pleasure. I mean, I've always felt the best thing you can do is hire or work with the very best people you can and let them do what they do. Yeah. Don't interfere. And I found ways to sort of cut up the pie, so to speak, so that everyone's efforts are pure and present. It's not this, the fabric perhaps is a reverse metaphor, because it was us coming on top, everything layering on top of each other and all of our ideas piling up to create this beauty. But that's the only instance where I believe that works. It's much better to set up systems to let people bloom and have their moments. And I project because of, the beautiful people I get to work with are all so gifted. They're beautiful artists in their own right. And as someone that gets to say, well, Joseph's type work is exquisite, so let's get Joseph to have a look at that. Or, however it works, it's really a pleasure to have people that excel, but love the pack mentality idea. Pack mentality is a beautiful effort. And the more that I think systems can be created with pack mentality, it's very good.
Are you at all intrigued by 3D printing, or do you see the technology in the way that it's developing going in a direction that would be terribly exciting to create?
Oh my gosh. Yes, just this morning. Is Zoe here? Oh, there. Oh my gosh. Hey. I had the most beautiful visit this morning to an artist studio here. I had the pleasure of working with Zoe. Please forgive me, what was your name? Amelia, thank you. I'm so sorry. Zoe and I were in a class in February, and Zoe is one of the artists that worked on the fabric here. So I was very happy to visit the studio this morning to see this exquisite work, just mind-blowing, that actually was the first time I thought, wow, this is This is kissing the future in the most beautiful way. It's an interface of sort of futuristic leaning concepts with human ideas. And it's this mix of like embroidered circuitry. You know, it was just this perfect sequins and rubber sequins that have been 3D cut. And I was so impressed with what you are. Am I embarrassing you? You're like you're sinking down in the chair there. Well, anyway, pardon me for inviting people over to your studio, but I think you all should go there and have a look. But that's I thought that for the first time today, I thought that was a perfect visual expression of an artist that is understanding the craft but leaning into the future in a way. I saw things that I had never seen before.
That's a huge compliment.
That's a big deal. That was a big deal.
Great.
There was one particular swatch. Everything was good, but this one that was sort of a fleshy colored rubber vinyl that had been re-embroidered with these opalescent flower-shaped sequins. So once there was this beautiful human touch, like through some cybery filter. It was spot on. So that makes me really hopeful. And you just need a whole room full of that gorgeous equipment, and then you can go to town.
Well,
But it works, but like 3D printers are $2,000 now instead of $300,000.
yeah, and then they're
that
going to
they
be 50 cents.
Yeah.
So just wait.
free with a fill-up at some point.
I think we should open the floor because everybody's here to talk to Todd, and you have the opportunity to talk to him. So I think anybody who has any questions or just wants to talk about anything.
Any questions? Yes.
Who was the wearer of these clothes?
I wish it had been me.
Well, it was a mix of people. You know, we had we were supported very strangely by a lot of people. You know, I'm really surprised as sort of daring and oftentimes very bare or see-through and ungodly expensive as these things were. We had a very nice cross-section. Many people in the entertainment field were interested. They looked great in pictures. So we had gajillions of editorials.
How expensive were they?
Very. No, in hindsight, the prices still seem shocking to me today. Some of the dresses were $10,000. You know, blouses at the time, like pants were $500, $600, $700, which today is outrageous. But 25 years ago, but I can back up why they were. I mean, they're
Well, you can
exquisite.
see why they were. I mean, now we understand craftsmanship and the couture hand.
Well,
absolutely.
I mean, there could be literally thousands of dollars of embroidery.
Yeah.
You know, 4-digit, when you look at a line list of all the ingredients that you're figuring out for your price list, there were 4-digit entries on these lists. So, I mean, they just added up. But it almost became, they were ridiculous. The prices were ridiculous. You know, I can't even say they were a proper priority. I don't know even if you have that much money, is it smart to spend $10,000?
Well, if you want a piece of art, yes. People will. It's unique. It's one of a kind, and it's unique.
I'd rather buy something else. But
Well, you don't have to buy your own.
no, I didn't. I know somebody. Yeah, I don't have to buy that. Questions? Yes.
Hi, I had the opportunity to meet you actually 22 years ago in your store in Soho.
Oh, right.
And every time I
Raul.
had the opportunity to approach to you and talk about it. Aside from the approach to design and the beautiful pieces that we have here, I think there's a quality of humbleness in your persona that I think reflects on the pieces. And I'm sure you've been an inspiration to many people, including me. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. I appreciate you coming. And last night you had those very sweet jeans on that we had done many years ago. Sexy. It says it right on the thing, so of course they're sexy, right? We wrote it down. Yeah. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. I have the great blessing of having my family that's been around me since I was born, so it's really hard to turn in an asshole with your family around you like this. So I hope I didn't have the natural leanings to get there, but I certainly had the curb to stop it. That's for sure. Yes?
I'm almost nervous talking to you. I've admired you for such a long time.
Oh, thank you.
My name is Jess, and I'm a mosaic artist, and I have two questions.
Yes?
One is if you could talk a bit about the mosaic-y fabric that are evident in some of the pieces upstairs. And the other thing I'd love to hear more about is your work championing the art of Ed Emberley and Charlie Harper, and I'm sure others that I'm not even aware of. I just also think it's so inspiring to see you creating these jewels upstairs that were worth a fortune. And yet you've also become such an important person in the world of handmade, homemade, do-it-yourself. And if you could also perhaps speak about that.
Certainly. Well, thank you for your kind words. It's nice to meet you. That tile work is extraordinary. I'm not sure, it may pop up here. It was made by, first, it's a felting technique, which is a very ancient technique. Do you know, I have a felting tip. The very first felt was made kind of grossly by a man that put, a priest that put wool roving in his shoes to try to make them more comfortable, and found over time the abrasion created these, what we know as felting. So that was the first. Isn't that gross? I'm so sorry. I should have probably never showed that.
I thought you were going to say something really gross.
That's okay. So toe jam was the impetus for felt, apparently. But that felt involved no feet, I promise you. This one is a very peculiar process that Leora came up with. And it's a traditional needle punch process, but the method that she prepared it in was so peculiar. You walked into this factory called La Montage, and it's still around, and it makes all kinds of, like if you go into the MoMA store, you'll see placemats and other things. Lovely, lovely woman, so impressive. And she came and showed me little bits of what she could do, and I freaked out. And we worked together for many years. If you could imagine a room that was filled with 300 rolls of dryer lint, like this big, in every conceivable, remember those rooms? Like you just had heart palpitations walking in, it was so beautiful. And the fibers would be pulled and dispersed and then layered. So you know exactly how mosaics and tile are laid. That coat is laid in the exact same manner. The tiles were pulled through about 8 layers of slightly different variants of color, and feathered and pulled in different ways, cut into the tiles and laid with a felting needle, which is a needle with notches on it that entangles upon insertion. And it was hand done until it locked into place. The way the patterns got on top, we would take a photograph of whatever I wanted. Everything from a Bengal tiger. We went to the Natural History Museum, photographed a Bengal tiger skin, projected it from a slide onto the ceiling, because you know how underneath the sides of the tiger are white? And I wanted the garments to also include that. So we would adjust the scale of the tiger spots to be just perfect. So the outside of the pant lined up with, crazy, right? So she would do that. Then the artist would sit in these rooms on what was basically insulation, these big, thick foam floors, and just punch it. So whenever it got into its form where it could be lifted again, it would then go to a factory up in Maine that made the Jarvik hearts, which was the first heart replacements. It was this very peculiar punching, and then there were several latex baths that it went through too. But what was so beautiful is that it would hold. It wouldn't pill or fuzz, which felt, can kind of get a rough surface over time. That didn't. But what I loved is that it hinged. It moved like tiles. So when you moved, if you bent your arm here, the grout lines, the lower parts, would bend with you, and you would get a pleat along the way. So that was an amazing technique. I just was thrilled to be a part of. I talked so long about that. What was your second question? Charlie. Oh my gosh. You're speaking of one of my great heroes. When I was 5 and 6 years old, I had the Golden Book of Biology, which Charlie had illustrated. And that book just locked in a permanent love of science. And more than that, it informed my color sense, which is still highly active today. Many decades later, I got to meet Charlie. And he was this lovely, enchanting man. I got to spend the last 7 years of his life with him. And he just, I don't know, he was pure magic to me. So to be able to have a front row seat to these masters, and then to have them turn over their archives to let them, to make these tributes, it's one of the most beautiful experiences. And I can't believe how many times I've had this. Yeah. Maybe through Charlie, or you mentioned Ed Emberley. Like, Ed lives in Ipswich, right? Not too far up the highway to Boston. And
Alexander Gerard.
Oh, exactly, Mr. Gerard. Now, this was unusual because Mr. Gerard's not living at this moment. However, he was certainly living through this book. We've never had a book where, we all worked on it, and it was crazy the amount of interference that a man that's not on this plane anymore caused. It was Kira Coffey, who wrote the book, her fingers would crumple when she was heading down a path that was inappropriate. we would hear things. If somebody was doing something obvious that was wrong, these giant crashes would appear. I mean, it wasn't just me or just Kira, it was literally all of us. All of us had very crazy stories with Mr. Gerard, but in a way, he felt, I'm surprised the lights aren't flickering, because I'm not kidding. I did a Gerard lecture at Art Center. Patrick was there. Where's Patrick? Remember that? I walked on stage, we were ready to start, and the whole lights just started going off and on, off and on. He does it every time.
And he and his brother had a secret language, and they wrote.
Oh my God, yes, the Kingdom of Fife. There's an exhibition of Mr. Gerard's unbelievable oeuvre. As much as you see that I've worked, picture like 100 times more, and that's what Mr. Gerard did. And his exhibition just opened at the Vitra Archive in Wilhelm Rhein, Germany, right near Basel. And it's going to be touring America, so keep your eyes open for that. But it was incredible. It was the first time this Kingdom of Five stuff has been shown, which I was kind of nervous about, because when we were looking at it, I had this overwhelming feeling of dread not to use it. Like, I just knew I should not work with this. This was a project a love letter between he and his brother. They made this entire world, cartographical maps of this made-up land, made up a whole new language with a full dictionary of translations, dozens and dozens of books, and no one could break the code. We found one document that explained the coding on it. So it was extraordinary, but when I went to use it, I knew we weren't supposed to touch it at all. When I'm at the end of a book, the way I work with books is I keep lots of envelopes and keep the images, and I can keep going back and forth and carry them around with me. And the Kingdom of Five stuff, I just sealed the envelope like several years before. That book took about 3 years. So at the end, I always go back through everything one more time to make sure I didn't lose anything. Well, I picked up that Kingdom of Five envelope, I opened it up, and I felt like I had been punched in the back of the neck and under my ribs. Something went bam like that. And I heard in the words, as though I heard, "I told you so." And I said, okay, and closed it back up and put it away. I didn't even look in it to see if I had missed something. But that's just one. I mean, there are endless stories like this of him communicating. It was crazy. Really, really out there. So it's a pleasure to get to work with, to have these artists turn over their life's effort. And then what a beautiful responsibility. I love rising to that occasion. We learn the artist's Rosetta Stone forward and backwards and only make decisions within it. We never decorate, we never add. And I think that's why both our living and our deceased artists are pleased with us.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
I'm a little nervous to talk to you as well.
Uh-oh.
I think, as like an 11, 12-year-old boy, I'd watch House of Style. But you served as a voice, as like a little kid.
Oh, that's
and
sweet.
like having Todd time was like a special moment. I watched it for them.
Oh, that's very sweet. You're speaking of this really wild show I did with MTV in the 90s called House of Style.
It was nice for me, and it
good.
pointed me in this direction. And
That's sweet.
I studied fashion here at RISD, and there was something about that making and that tactile nature that I've held forever. I design toys now, and I make a lot of different things. But you served as such an inspiration to me just being in a suburb somewhere in Rhode Island.
That is so sweet for you to say, and I'm so happy to hear you say that you studied fashion and you're making toys. That is fantastic. That's the best thing you could do, is to keep stretching the imagination.
Yeah, it works better for me.
It does. Well, I always think it's just a medium shift. I don't have any different approach or head, no matter what I'm doing. It's just the ingredients changed, and that's, you're doing it, which is fantastic.
Thanks.
House of Style was a lot of fun, and it's a voice that I'm very sorry to say is not in the world any longer. We had a level playing field for creativity, and it didn't matter what it was or what it cost, and so much confusion about style being attached to money, which is indeed not the case in any flavor. And so I would interview Gianni Versace or John Galliano in one moment, and then we'd make like a 69-cent back-to-school special where we showed you how to literally do things for 69 cents. And it was all exactly on the same plane, and I loved that. And that was really due to the team. Cindy Crawford hosted, and Cindy's an enchantress, and was just perfect at the time. This was before models talked, And Cindy didn't make any pretense to be just like a sweet goober from the Midwest, and she just happens to be fucking Cindy Crawford, and so that was really great. And then all the support systems, but the head of it was named Elisa Bellatini, and she was just this wild woman, like an actual wild woman, who allowed us such freedom. And she would say, okay, you got 4 minutes and 18 seconds, what are you doing? And I would literally produce, shoot, edit, and hand her the tape, and they would air it, which isn't not the way it's done now. But the fact that we had that kind of freedom, it was always felt like the parents weren't home at MTV. That was very, very fun to do. But I wish that diplomatic voice and that great love of creating and creativity would find a way to come back forward. So any of you guys want to bring something like that, we'll all clap for you. Yeah, you had a question here.
I did. I'm really interested to hear you talk more about the collection. That I loved everything, but especially the little crop top that's got a little bat on it with its cute little black miniskirt.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah, it makes me really happy. The whole collection came from I love it so much.
Thank you.
But I'd love to hear you talk about how you balance within your work the amazing couture fine art aspect and still manage to be like irreverent and sort of delightful and playful at the same time.
Well, to me, that was the most interesting combination of things. I like serious things. I do. They're beautiful, but it's not really my personality or, it's not in my circle necessarily to be so fancy. So it was, to me, it was the combination of those ideas that breathed new life into them. Because, those kinds of serious efforts and those price tags and that kind of couture beading and all the gold, but, it's a very bad version of Mona Lisa. And to me, it made me laugh so hard, and I just loved it. I loved it. And it was just amazing to me that so many people interfaced with it. I think that one of the reasons things went so well for me in this, through fashion, was the kindness of so many people. I mean, certainly Wendy, incredibly generous along the way, but it was other designers too. Elisa Bellatini, my friend, was wearing the Mona Lisa skirt to cover the Paris shows, and she was wearing it one day, and Gianni Versace saw it, and he freaked out and couldn't have been kinder, and told the press, you need to go see this guy. And the same thing happened with Giorgio Armani, and the same thing happened with Azadine Alaya. And I mean, imagine that phone call. I couldn't believe it. These were people that, I have a love letter from Christian Lacroix. I mean, I still can't believe that. That sounds made up, but it is indeed.
No, I can totally
it indeed
understand it.
happened.
They know the talent and brilliance when they see it.
But how kind. I mean, imagine, Johnny didn't have
But
to
I'm
do
going to
that.
say this, it's you. Because
Oh,
those
wow.
men are not always kind. So it's really you.
Well, they were very sweet to me, and it was a huge deal to have Versace tell an editor, go look at this.
Yeah.
They went and looked at it, and it was amazing. Our ascension was not like it wasn't this, it was like, whoop, we just went straight up. It was a funny ride.
Hi, how are you? How do you deal with social media these days, is my first question. And
Well, okay, yeah, you have another?
I thought I'd maybe list them.
Oh, okay.
And see where we go.
I have a
from there.
two-question memory, so you might want to
Okay,
stop
all
there. You
right.
can ask again.
That's okay, I understand. Second question is sadly, we're only dealing with this now, but in regard to models and body image and how this affects your fashion sense, and back to the social media thing. But it seems these are really big topics nowadays. And
Well, they weren't spoken about at the time in the ways that they are now, and I'm happy that the discussion's out there, but it was just something that felt reasonable to me. I was never attached to, like, what perfect beauty was didn't mean a wasp waist and those sorts of things. So you see in the models, we were known to have the most diverse cast, and I would read about this. It was never anything intentional, but to me, some of the most beautiful people in the world are the Iranians. They're just the most gorgeous everything. So that mixed with, what's more beautiful than any skin color that's not mine? You know, I was just fascinated and thrilled with the rest of the world, so I couldn't imagine just not including it in the efforts. And you'll see those, like there's people with flesh on them. There was not like concave hip bones at that time. And they were small, I mean, they're small women, let's not fool ourselves, but they weren't unhealthy. And I think that was a big difference. So we didn't have the same kind of issues. And they weren't children. I didn't work with children. There was towards the end of my trajectory, there was starting to be this terrible idea of younger and younger and younger. I think Tom Ford did just this ridiculous thing with 12-year-olds, literally 12-year-olds. And it grossed me out. And I wanted no part of any of that. It's inappropriate and it's unhealthy.
Do you do social media?
I love Instagram because it's great. Well, it's just like pinning something on your board for people to enjoy. And I don't get involved in the comments. I don't write back. I don't do any of that stuff. But I like putting the things on the bulletin board, and that's it. The rest of it, I have no interest. And I think that it's a super unhealthy blight on our planet. Frankly, on several levels. Shall I turn into another old person rant here? Let's do it. Let's bring it on. Okay. So the main problem is that it causes a disconnect. There's no way that you can appreciate the love and of the RPMs of creativity when it short circuits the second you start doing this. And when I get to work with a lot of stores, and one of them is Target stores, and when I first joined them, they were doing studies because literally people's peripheral vision had decreased by 15%. So they're trying to figure out how to market things to you tighter because you can no longer see things that are up here. Isn't that horrifying? So that's science. That's like a corporate thing that's happening right now. So I understand the sharing. I get some of the joys in it, but I think it touches on this weird addictive personality that sort of is, it's a great American thing, I think, in many ways. The sharing is great. I love seeing, my friend Amy Sedaris is the most brilliant Instagram account. It's just like getting a fresh show every day. What's better than that? And Larry Cron's here. Larry's an incredible artist, and I love seeing what Larry does. And Michelle at Land of Nod. This is what's so fun. I get to keep up with my friends, and even if I don't get to see them, I know where they are. So I do love that. I really, really love it. I just wish there was more analog experiences in combination with the social media. Do we need this in our life? I don't know. Does it feel better to be connected to 1 gajillion people you don't know? I don't know. Not for me. That sounded so grumpy. I'm sorry. But I do mean it. What do you think, Wendy?
I think it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I appreciate it on so many levels, and I have to say I also have learned a lot, and I've actually contacted people who've had interesting things. But what I find really difficult is my job is to look at things and report, and if I also have to be Instagramming and Facebooking, and it's so distracting, and it takes so much time. So it's kind of a love-hate thing. I think it's very difficult. I also think, I was at a museum and someone told me to get out of the way because they were taking a picture.
Oh my
and I just
God.
thought, but that's we're all here to look at things, and it's just everybody in museums now, they're taking photographs. They're not even looking at the things they're photographing. So it's a little odd.
Even at the fashion shows, you'll see that, the finales are just people doing something in their laps, not, I don't know. It does God, this is old people griping. Let's move on. Sorry, move on.
It is good too. It's really, really good.
Yeah. I think we have time probably for one more question. Is there one more question? Or we're also happy to let you go spend your afternoon. Yes?
My reaction to the exposition, to your exposition, was very shocking. I'm Italian, and I've been exposed to haute couture all my life, and it was so incredible to see the wonderful pieces. But I wasn't sure it was haute couture, because I've been teach how everything is so severe and rigorous and elegant and expected in a way. And your pieces are wonderful, but I wonder, during your career, and this is, I apologize if I don't know enough about you, but did you have any pret-a-porter collections where you could approach? I mean, it's complicated to me to explain this question.
No, I understand your question.
I mean,
the things that didn't have 4-digit price tags. Yes, we definitely did. We had, what you're seeing, like I said, is just a morsel of what we did. And I could have shown you many nice suits, for sure. But I just didn't feel that one could learn from seeing that. So I was very careful in choosing to sort of remove the, I don't know, maybe the more normal things. They were there, and they were certainly the bulk of what we did. This was indeed not what, these things were little morsels. We always said we were the cherry on the cake, never the cake. So it kind of, we were kind of like a little sparkle in wherever we went. But thank you for your kind words about, I know that you know haute couture, and to see the passion and understand the making of it. Well, strangely, there's more couture now than we've had in several years, but it is still a dying art.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful that it's being protected.
Well, thank you so much for joining
you.
us. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you.